The massive Zephyrian warship floated in space like a dark metal mountain. Its hull stretched for miles, covered in weapon ports and armor plating that gleamed under the distant stars. On the bridge, Admiral Kextar stood with his forearms crossed behind his back, watching the last human ship disappear into the black void. "Sir, the final human vessel has jumped away," reported Lieutenant Velnara from her control station. Her blue skin showed the excitement that all Zephyrians felt. All human colonies in this sector are now empty or destroyed. Kextar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. The humans had been trouble for 20 years. These strange creatures from the small yellow star had dared to build colonies in space that belonged to the Zephyrian Empire. They had refused to leave when ordered. They had fought back when attacked. But now, finally, they were gone. "Send word to the High Council," Kextar ordered. "Tell them the human problem is solved. The Outer Rim belongs to us again." The Zephyrians had good reason to celebrate. For 3,000 years their empire had controlled this part of space. They were tall, strong, and smart. Their technology was advanced. Their fleets were huge. When they wanted something, they took it. When someone opposed them, they crushed them. The humans had been different from other species the Empire had conquered. Most aliens surrendered quickly when they saw Zephyrian ships. The humans kept fighting even when they were losing. They used tricks and strange tactics. They never gave up even when their cities burned. But human stubbornness had only made their defeat worse. Kextar remembered the battle at New Denver Colony. The humans had refused to surrender even when Zephyrian ships surrounded the planet. They had kept shooting until the very end. So Kextar had ordered the colony burned. 10,000 humans had died that day. "Admiral," called another officer from across the bridge. "We are receiving celebration messages from all sectors." "The Empire rejoices in our victory," Kextar nodded. Across Zephyrian space, citizens were dancing in the streets. Military commanders were toasting their success. The news networks were calling it the greatest victory in recent history. The troublesome humans had been driven back to their tiny home system around Sol. They would never bother the Empire again. What the Zephyrians did not know was that Captain Jake Morrison had watched New Denver burn from his evacuation ship. He had been forced to leave those 10,000 people behind because his orders were to save the fleet, not fight a hopeless battle. Morrison had counted every explosion on the planet's surface. He had memorized every ship in Kextar's fleet. He had recorded every detail about Zephyrian weapons and tactics. Morrison's ship, the Liberty Bell, was old and small compared to Zephyrian warships. But it carried something more valuable than weapons. It carried information. During the evacuation, human ships had scanned every Zephyrian vessel they encountered. They had analyzed their shield frequencies. They had studied their communication systems. They had mapped their supply lines and base locations. The human captain also carried personal messages from the colonists who had died. Parents asking him to tell their children on Earth that they loved them. Farmers hoping their sacrifice would mean something. Soldiers promising that humanity would remember. As Morrison's fleet jumped through hyperspace toward Earth, he thought about those messages. The Zephyrians believed they had won a great victory. They thought the humans were beaten and would never return. They were wrong. On the bridge of the Liberty Bell, Morrison called his senior officers together. Commander Lisa Barnes, his second-in-command, had lost her brother at New Denver. Lieutenant Paul Roberts had watched his hometown on Kepler Colony get destroyed 3 months earlier. Every officer in the room had personal reasons to hate the Zephyrians. "Listen carefully," Morrison told them. "What happened out here was not a defeat. It was intelligence gathering. We learned everything we need to know about Zephyrian military capabilities. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their blind spots." Barnes leaned forward. "What are you saying, Captain?" Morrison's eyes were hard as steel. "I'm saying the Zephyrians made a mistake. They think we're primitive and weak. They think we'll stay in our home system and hide. They have no idea what humanity is capable of when we're really angry." The human fleet continued its journey toward Earth. Behind them, Zephyrian forces were already spreading out to occupy the abandoned human colonies. They were setting up mining operations and military bases. They were claiming planets that humans had called home. Admiral Kextar received reports from his commanders about the occupation. Everything was going smoothly. The humans had left some useful infrastructure behind. Zephyrian engineers were adapting human farms and factories for their own use. The Empire would be richer and stronger than before. "Sir," Lieutenant Velnara said, The High Council has sent a message. They want to congratulate you personally when we return home. Kextar felt proud. This victory would make him famous throughout the Empire. He would be promoted to Fleet Admiral. His name would be remembered alongside the greatest Zephyrian military leaders in history. But in the darkness of space, something was already changing. Human communication networks were sending coded messages to every human world. Military factories were receiving new orders. Scientists were studying the data that Morrison's fleet had gathered. Earth's government was making plans that would shock the galaxy. The Zephyrians celebrated their victory for 3 days. There were parades in the capital cities. Military bands played victory songs. Children were given toys shaped like Zephyrian warships crushing human vessels. Kextar enjoyed every moment of it. He gave speeches about Zephyrian superiority. He told reporters that the Empire was stronger than ever. He promised that no alien species would dare challenge them again. The Admiral had no way of knowing that his greatest mistake was not destroying the human fleet completely. By letting them escape, he had given humanity something the Zephyrians had never faced before, an enemy that learned from defeat, planned for revenge, and never forgot those who had died. As the celebrations continued across the Zephyrian Empire, Captain Morrison's fleet finally reached Earth. The blue planet hung in space like a jewel, beautiful and peaceful. But Morrison knew that peace would not last long. Humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened when you killed their families and burned their homes. The real war was just beginning. 6 months had passed since the great victory. The Zephyrian Empire had settled into its new territories like a fat snake, digesting a large meal. Mining operations hummed across dozens of former human worlds. Trade routes carried wealth back to the Zephyrian homeworld. Military bases stood guard over the conquered space. Admiral Kextar had been promoted to Fleet Admiral as promised. He now commanded the entire Outer Rim Defense Force from his new flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The massive ship was even larger than his old vessel, bristling with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. But Kextar's forces were spread thin across the vast territory they now controlled. The Empire had always fought by gathering overwhelming force against single targets. They had never needed to defend such a huge area at the same time. Kextar commanded 300 ships, but they were scattered across 17 star systems. Each base had only a small patrol fleet to protect it. "Sir, the monthly reports show excellent progress," Lieutenant Velnara informed him. She had been promoted to commander after the human campaign. "Mining output is up 30%. Trade income has increased by 40%. The High Council is very pleased." Kextar nodded absently as he studied star charts of his territory. Something had been bothering him lately, though he could not put his finger on what it was. Small things. Patrol reports of strange energy readings at the edge of sensor range. Communication glitches that happened just a little too often. Equipment failures that seemed almost planned. "Commander, have we had any contact with human vessels since the evacuation?" he asked. Velnara checked her records. "No, sir. Our long-range sensors show human ships staying well within their home system. They appear to have given up any thoughts of expansion." This was exactly what Zephyrian intelligence believed. Their spy satellites near the Sol system reported normal human activity. Cargo ships moving between Earth and Mars. Passenger vessels traveling to the asteroid belt. Nothing that looked like military buildup. What the Zephyrian spies could not see were the massive construction projects hidden on the far side of Luna and in the depths of the asteroid belt. Human engineers were working around the clock to build a new type of warship. These vessels looked like cargo haulers from the outside, but their hulls contained the most advanced weapons humanity had ever created. On Earth, President Lisa Carter stood in the secure briefing room beneath the White House. Around the table sat the most important people in human government and military. General Paul Rodriguez commanded Earth's defense forces. Dr. Helen Burke led the science team studying Zephyrian technology. Admiral Katie Sullivan would soon command humanity's revenge. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter began, 6 months ago, the Zephyrians thought they destroyed us. They drove us from our colonies and killed our people. They believe we are beaten. Today, we prove them wrong. General Rodriguez activated a holographic display showing the Outer Rim territories. Red dots marked Zephyrian bases and patrol routes. Blue lines showed supply convoys and communication networks. Yellow markers indicated critical infrastructure points. "Operation Homecoming is ready to begin," Rodriguez announced. We have identified every major Zephyrian installation in the captured territories. We know their patrol schedules, their supply lines, and their defensive capabilities. Dr. Burke stepped forward with technical data that made everyone in the room smile. Our analysis of Zephyrian equipment captured during the evacuation has revealed significant weaknesses. Their shields operate on predictable frequency patterns. Their communication systems have exploitable vulnerabilities. Most importantly, their command structure depends entirely on centralized control. This was the key discovery that would change everything. Zephyrian military doctrine assumed that orders would always come from the top down. Local commanders had very little authority to make independent decisions. If the communication network failed, their fleets would be confused and helpless. Admiral Sullivan reviewed the fleet composition on her personal tablet. Nearly 200 human vessels had been secretly built or converted for this mission. Each ship carried new quantum torpedo systems designed specifically to penetrate Zephyrian shields. More importantly, each ship was equipped with advanced stealth technology that made them nearly invisible to enemy sensors. The plan is simple, Sullivan explained to the assembled leaders. We strike 17 targets simultaneously. Communication relays, supply depots, isolated bases, and patrol fleets. We hit them fast and hard, then disappear before they can respond. By the time they realize what's happening, their entire defensive network will be in ruins. President Carter looked around the room at the faces of humanity's best military minds. 6 months ago, these same people had been planning evacuation routes and refugee camps. Now they were planning the largest military operation in human history. Admiral Sullivan, Carter said formally, you have authorization to proceed with Operation Homecoming. Show the galaxy that humanity does not forgive and we never forget. In the Outer Rim, Zephyrian forces continued their routine patrols and mining operations. They had no idea that human scout ships were already moving through their territory, invisible to sensors, mapping every detail of their defenses. These ghost ships had been infiltrating Zephyrian space for weeks, gathering the final intelligence needed for the attack. Captain Alex Thompson commanded one of these scout vessels, the Midnight Runner. His ship looked like a small asteroid from the outside, but it contained the most sophisticated sensors and stealth systems humanity could build. For 2 weeks, Thompson had been watching the Zephyrian supply depot at Zarian 7. Sir, reported his sensor operator, the Zephyrian patrol just jumped to hyperspace. The depot is undefended for the next 6 hours. Thompson smiled grimly. The Zephyrians were so confident in their victory that they left critical installations with minimal protection. Zarian 7 supplied 6 different military bases with fuel, weapons, and spare parts. Without it, those bases would be helpless within days. Mark the target, Thompson ordered. Send the data to Fleet Command. Tell them Zarian 7 is ripe for harvest. Similar reports were coming in from scout ships throughout Zephyrian territory. Captain Lucy Bennett's team had identified a critical communication relay that coordinated 3 star systems. Commander Tim Foster had found a repair facility that serviced half the Zephyrian patrol fleet. Every weakness in the enemy's defense network was being cataloged and exploited. Back on the Eternal Dominion, Fleet Admiral Kexitar continued to feel uneasy about the situation. His instincts told him something was wrong, but all the reports showed normal conditions. Human activity was minimal. No hostile ships had been detected. Everything appeared peaceful. Commander Velnara, he called out, increase long-range patrols by 20%. I want early warning if anything unusual happens. Yes, sir, she replied, though she thought the order was unnecessary. May I ask what you're concerned about? Kexter stared out at the stars through the bridge windows. Just a feeling. The humans gave up too easily. In 20 years of conflict, they never backed down from a fight. Now suddenly they're hiding in their home system like frightened children. It doesn't match their behavior pattern. What Kextar did not realize was that the humans had not given up at all. They had simply learned that direct confrontation with superior numbers was futile. Instead, they had spent 6 months studying their enemy, preparing new weapons and planning a campaign that would turn Zephyrian strength into weakness. In 72 hours, Admiral Sullivan's fleet would begin the largest coordinated attack in human military history. The Zephyrians had celebrated their victory over humanity. Soon they would learn why that celebration had been premature. Strange reports began reaching Fleet Admiral Kextar's headquarters. Communication arrays suffering mysterious failures. Sensor contacts that appeared and vanished like ghosts. Equipment breakdowns that happened at the worst possible times. At first, Kextar dismissed these incidents as routine maintenance issues or natural space phenomena. "Sir," Commander Velnara approached his command chair with obvious worry. "We've lost contact with mining station Zerion 7. Their last transmission mentioned unknown contacts approaching the system. Then nothing." Kextar felt a cold chill run down his spine. Zerion 7 was a critical supply depot that fed resources to 6 different military bases. Without it, those installations would run out of fuel and ammunition within days. "Send Patrol Squadron 5 to investigate," he ordered. "Have them report back immediately." But Patrol Squadron 5 was 3 hours away from Zerion 7. By the time they arrived, they would find only empty space where the mining station used to be. The humans had already begun their campaign of vengeance. Deep in the void between star systems, nearly 200 human warships moved through hyperspace in perfect formation. Admiral Katie Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, studying the final attack plans. Her ship was larger than anything humanity had built before, designed specifically for this mission. Sullivan had been a junior captain during the evacuation 6 months ago. She had been forced to watch helplessly as Zephyrian ships bombarded New Denver Colony, killing thousands of innocent civilians, while she could only provide cover for escaping refugees. The memory of those dying colonists had forged her into humanity's most determined military leader. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Sullivan," she broadcast on the encrypted command channel. "Operation Homecoming begins in 60 hours. Remember our mission. We are not here to occupy territory. We are here to send a message that will echo across the galaxy for generations." Captain Alex Thompson received the transmission aboard his ship, the UES Vengeance. His target was the supply depot at Zerion 7. The intelligence reports showed 12 Zephyrian workers and minimal defenses. It would be over in minutes. Thompson's vessel represented everything humanity had learned about warfare against superior opponents. The ship looked like a harmless cargo hauler, but its hull contained quantum torpedo launchers that could punch through any known shield system. Stealth technology made it invisible to Zephyrian sensors until it was too late. "Captain," reported his tactical officer, "we're approaching the target system. No Zephyrian patrol ships detected," Thompson smiled grimly. The Zephyrians were so confident in their victory that they had reduced security throughout their territory. They never imagined that humanity would dare to return for revenge. In another part of space, Captain Lucy Bennett prepared her own ship for attack. The UES Defiance was tasked with destroying a communication relay that coordinated 3 entire star systems. Without it, Zephyrian commanders would be blind and deaf to coordinated attacks. Bennett had lost her entire family when the Zephyrians destroyed Kepler Colony. Her parents, her younger brother, and her newborn niece had all died in the bombardment. The Zephyrians had given no warning, accepted no surrender. They had simply opened fire on defenseless civilians. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving final confirmation codes from Fleet Command. All units are in position." Bennett nodded. Across 17 star systems, human ships were moving into attack positions. The Zephyrians had no idea what was coming for them. On the Eternal Dominion, Fleet Admiral Kextar grew more worried by the hour. The feeling that something was terribly wrong would not leave him alone. He had ordered increased patrols, but his forces were spread too thin to provide real security. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Thexani called from the intelligence station, "we're receiving scattered reports of sensor anomalies throughout the sector. Multiple contacts appearing and disappearing. Communication disruptions. Equipment failures." Kextar studied the reports with growing alarm. The incident seemed random, but there was a pattern if you looked carefully. They were happening near critical installations, supply depots, communication relays, repair facilities. "Double the guard at all major bases," he ordered. "Send additional patrol squadrons to investigate these anomalies." But Kextar's forces were already stretched to their limits. He commanded 300 ships across 17 star systems. Each additional patrol mission left somewhere else undefended. The Zephyrian military had been designed to crush enemies with overwhelming force, not to defend vast territories against invisible attackers. What Kextar did not know was that human intelligence had been studying Zephyrian tactics for 6 months. They understood exactly how the Empire's forces were organized. They knew which targets were critical and which were merely important. Most significantly, they had learned that Zephyrian commanders could not function without constant communication. with higher authority. Admiral Sullivan reviewed the psychological profile that human analysts had prepared on Fleet Admiral Kextar. The Zephyrian commander was intelligent and experienced, but he had one critical weakness. He was too confident in his own superiority. He could not imagine that a primitive species like humanity could threaten his mighty empire. "Admiral," reported Captain Morrison from his position aboard the Liberty Bell, "all reconnaissance teams have confirmed their targets. The Zephyrians suspect something, but they have no idea of the scope of our operation." Sullivan felt satisfied. The human fleet had positioned itself perfectly for the most devastating surprise attack in galactic history. Tomorrow, the Zephyrians would discover that their victory celebration had been premature. On Zarion 7, the Zephyrian mining crew went about their routine duties with no idea that death was approaching from the darkness. Supervisor Gextal reviewed the daily production reports while his workers loaded precious metals into cargo containers. The station's shields were down for routine maintenance. Their communication array was experiencing the same mysterious glitches that had been reported throughout the sector. "Supervisor," called worker Nexpa from the sensor station, "I'm detecting some kind of energy disturbance approaching the system. But it's probably just solar radiation." Gextal barely glanced at the reading. Sensor glitches had become common lately. He assumed it was interference from increased mining operations or natural space phenomena. The thought that human warships might be approaching never crossed his mind. In 30 minutes, Captain Thompson's ship would drop out of hyperspace and obliterate the mining station in a matter of seconds. The 12 Zephyrians aboard would never know what killed them. Similar scenes were playing out across Zephyrian territory. Commanders dismissing warning signs, workers ignoring sensor readings, guards relaxing their vigilance because they believed humanity was beaten and broken. The Zephyrians had made the fatal mistake of underestimating their enemy. They thought humans were primitive and weak. They assumed that driving them from the outer rim meant permanent victory. They had no concept of humanity's capacity for patience, planning, and overwhelming retaliation. Admiral Sullivan stood alone in her private quarters, looking out at the stars through a small window. Tomorrow, she would begin the campaign that would avenge every human death in the outer rim. The Zephyrians had taught humanity a harsh lesson about the price of weakness. Now humanity would teach them about the price of cruelty. In 18 hours, the galaxy would learn why it was dangerous to make an enemy of the human race. The attack began at exactly 0300 Galactic Standard Time across 17 different star systems. Zephyrian sensor operators watched their screens in disbelief as contact after contact appeared from nowhere, moving with deadly precision that spoke of months of careful planning. At mining station Zarion 7, Supervisor Gextal was reviewing the night shift reports when his sensor operator suddenly screamed, "Sir, unknown vessel dropping out of hyperspace. It's massive." Captain Thompson's ship, the UES Vengeance, materialized barely 1,000 kilometers from the mining station. The human vessel looked nothing like the primitive ships the Zephyrians remembered fighting. This was a purpose-built instrument of war, bristling with weapons designed specifically to kill Zephyrians. "Target locked," reported Thompson's tactical officer. "Quantum torpedoes ready." "Fire," Thompson ordered coldly. 6 quantum torpedoes streaked across space faster than the Zephyrians could react. The mining station's shields were down for maintenance. The weapons tore through the hull like paper, turning the facility into expanding clouds of metal and flame. 12 Zephyrians died instantly, never knowing what had killed them. The Vengeance vanished back into hyperspace before the wreckage stopped tumbling. Total time in normal space, 47 seconds. Similar attacks erupted across Zephyrian territory with clockwork precision. Captain Lucy Bennett's ship appeared above Communication Relay Station Alpha 9 and destroyed it with a single devastating barrage. Commander Tim Foster's vessel obliterated a repair facility that serviced half the sector's patrol fleet. Captain Sarah Williams eliminated a fuel depot that supplied 3 major military bases. Fleet Admiral Kextar received the first emergency reports while reviewing routine patrol schedules in his quarters. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, his aide burst through the door without waiting for permission to enter. "Sir, we're receiving emergency transmissions from multiple sectors. Coordinated attacks. Massive casualties. Our installations are being destroyed." Kextar rushed to the bridge where chaos greeted him. Communication officers were frantically trying to contact bases throughout the sector. Most were not responding. The few that answered reported attacks by unknown vessels that appeared and vanished like ghosts. How many ships? Kekstar demanded. Unknown, sir, replied Commander Velnara, her blue skin pale with shock. The attacks are happening simultaneously across 17 systems. Either they have hundreds of vessels, or they're moving faster than our sensors can track. The truth was even worse than Velnara imagined. Admiral Sullivan had divided her fleet into 17 attack groups, each targeting a different star system. The human ships were using quantum tunnel drives that allowed them to jump between systems in minutes, rather than hours. They could hit a target, disappear, and reappear somewhere else before the Zephyrians could respond. Sir, reported the intelligence officer, preliminary analysis suggests these are human vessels. The energy signatures match data from the evacuation campaign. Kekstar felt his blood turn to ice. Impossible. The humans have maybe 100 ships total. We confirmed this during the evacuation. They cannot be in 17 places at once, but the reports kept coming in. Every major military installation in the Outer Rim was either destroyed or under attack. Communication networks were failing as relay stations went offline. Supply lines collapsed as depots burned. Patrol fleets found themselves isolated and cut off from higher command. Send Squadron 12 to investigate the Zarian 7 attack, Kekstar ordered. Have Squadron 15 move to protect the Bendari fuel depot. Sir, Velnara said quietly. Both the Zarian depot and Bendari fuel facility have already been destroyed. Squadron 12 is reporting that Zarian 7 no longer exists. The scope of the disaster was becoming clear. In 6 hours, the Zephyrian Empire had lost more military infrastructure than in the previous century of warfare. The humans were not just attacking randomly, they were systematically destroying everything that made Imperial control possible. Admiral Sullivan coordinated the assault from her flagship as it moved between target systems. Her tactical display showed green lights as objectives were eliminated across the sector. Each destroyed installation weakened Zephyrian control and sent a message to the galaxy. Admiral, reported Captain Morrison from the Liberty Bell, Communications Relay Gamma 7 has been eliminated. That cuts coordination between the Outer Rim and Zephyrian High Command. Sullivan smiled grimly. Without real-time communication with their homeworld, local Zephyrian commanders would have to make decisions independently. But their military doctrine provided no training for independent command. They were trained to follow orders from above, not to think for themselves. The psychological impact was even more devastating than the physical damage. Zephyrian forces throughout the sector found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. Ships would appear from nowhere, destroy their targets with overwhelming firepower, and vanish before defenders could respond. Captain Alex Thompson's group had already eliminated 4 separate targets and was moving to attack a Zephyrian patrol base. His ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the unsuspecting installation. Unknown vessels. The Zephyrian base commander transmitted desperately. Identify yourselves. Why are you attacking us? Thompson opened a communication channel so the enemy could see his face. I am Captain Thompson of the United Earth Navy. We are here because you murdered 10,000 civilians at New Denver Colony. We are here because you thought humanity would forgive and forget. You were wrong. The base's shields lasted 30 seconds against human quantum torpedoes. The installation's 18 defenders died fighting, but they never had a chance. Thompson's ships vanished back into hyperspace, leaving only wreckage behind. Fleet Admiral Kekstar tried desperately to coordinate a response, but his command structure was falling apart. Communication relays were down throughout the sector. His scattered fleets could not coordinate with each other. Local commanders were making panicked decisions without understanding the bigger picture. Sir, Commander Velnara reported, we're receiving word that Patrol Fleet 7 engaged unknown vessels near the Altair system. They report destroying 1 enemy ship before the rest escaped. Kekstar felt a moment of hope. Excellent. What can we learn from the wreckage? Sir, there was no wreckage. The human ship appeared to self-destruct when disabled. Our forces found no recoverable technology or intelligence data. The hope died as quickly as it had appeared. The humans were not just better prepared than expected. They were fighting with a level of planning and coordination that the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered. Every detail had been considered, including what to do if ships were captured. As the day continued, the full scope of human planning became clear. They had not just attacked military targets. They had identified every critical piece of infrastructure that supported Zephyrian control. Power plants that supplied energy to bases, manufacturing facilities that produced spare parts, even the orbital elevators that moved cargo between planets and space stations. By nightfall, Zephyrian control over the outer rim had effectively collapsed, not through occupation or conquest, but through the systematic destruction of everything that made control possible. Admiral Sullivan's fleet had achieved in one day what conventional warfare might have taken years to accomplish. "Admiral," Captain Bennett reported from the bridge of the Defiance, "all primary objectives have been eliminated. Secondary targets are being engaged according to schedule." Sullivan looked at her tactical display with satisfaction. Every green light represented a Zephyrian installation that would never threaten human colonies again. Every destroyed facility was a message to the galaxy that humanity remembered its dead and would have justice for their sacrifice. The Zephyrians had celebrated their victory over humanity 6 months ago. Tonight they were learning the price of that celebration. By the end of the week, the Zephyrian Empire's control over the Outer Rim had collapsed completely. Fleet Admiral Kextar found himself commanding a fleet with no bases to resupply from, no communication network to coordinate through, and no intelligence about where the next human attack would come from. The numbers told the story of total defeat: 17 major military installations destroyed, 43 patrol vessels eliminated, 68 supply depots and communication relays reduced to wreckage. The infrastructure that had taken decades to build was gone in 7 days of coordinated human attacks. "Sir," Commander Velnara reported from her station, her voice hollow with exhaustion, "the High Council is demanding answers. They want to know how a primitive species destroyed our entire outer defense network." Kextar had no good answers. Every report he sent back to the homeworld sounded like the ravings of a madman. Ships that appeared from nowhere, weapons that cut through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper, an enemy that seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum damage. The truth was that humanity had spent 6 months studying every detail of Zephyrian military operations. They knew which installations were critical and which were merely important. They understood that the Empire's centralized command structure would collapse if communication networks failed. Most importantly, they had learned to turn Zephyrian arrogance into a weapon against them. "Admiral," called the sensor operator, "we're detecting a single vessel approaching. It's requesting permission to communicate." Kextar felt his heart skip a beat. For a week, the humans had struck without warning and vanished without negotiation. If they wanted to talk now, it meant something important was about to happen. "Put them on screen," he ordered. The main display activated to show the bridge of a human warship. A female captain sat in the command chair, her expression cold as the void between stars. Behind her, Kextar could see technology that was clearly more advanced than anything in his own fleet. "Zephyrian vessel," the human said. "This is Captain Lucy Bennett of the United Earth Navy. Your Admiral has 1 minute to respond before we demonstrate what human primitive technology can really do." Kextar's hands trembled as he activated the communication system. This human had just threatened the flagship of the Zephyrian Empire while surrounded by empty space. Either she was insane, or humanity possessed capabilities that intelligence had never imagined. "Captain Bennett," Kextar managed to say, "I am Fleet Admiral Kextar of the Zephyrian Empire. What do you want?" Bennett's smile held no warmth. Behind her, other human officers worked at control stations that displayed tactical information about every Zephyrian ship in the sector. They knew exactly where his scattered forces were positioned. "What do we want?" Bennett repeated the question as if it amused her. "Admiral, you seem to misunderstand the situation. We're not here to negotiate. We're not here to demand territory or resources. We're here to deliver a message from the people you drove from their homes." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The message is this: humanity remembers. We remember every colony you burned, every ship you destroyed, every life you took. We remember the families torn apart, the children left orphaned, the dreams destroyed by your arrogance." Kextar felt cold fear creeping up his spine. This human was not interested in military victory or territorial gain. She was talking about something far more dangerous: justice. "You celebrated your victory over us," Bennett continued. "You thought we were beaten, broken, finished. You made the mistake of believing that driving us away meant we would stay away. You were wrong. On the tactical display behind Bennett, Kextar could see red dots marking the locations of his remaining ships. There were green contacts moving to intercept them, human vessels closing in from multiple directions. His scattered forces were about to be surrounded and destroyed. "The next time your empire considers attacking human worlds," Bennett said, her voice carrying across space like a death sentence, "remember what happened to your impregnable outer rim defenses in 7 days. Remember that humanity does not forgive and we never forget." The transmission ended. Bennett's ship vanished back into hyperspace, leaving Kextar alone with the magnitude of his failure. Around him, the bridge crew stared at empty screens, trying to process what they had just witnessed. "Sir," Velnara whispered, "what are your orders?" Kextar looked around at the officers who had served him faithfully through the human campaign. Young Zephyrians who had believed in the Empire's strength and righteousness. Now they were learning that strength without wisdom was useless and righteousness meant nothing to the families of the dead. "Signal all ships," he said quietly. "We're withdrawing to the homeworld. The outer rim is no longer ours to defend." The retreat began immediately. Surviving Zephyrian forces abandoned their posts and jumped to hyperspace, fleeing toward the safety of their core systems. Behind them, they left the wreckage of the greatest military disaster in Empire history. When Admiral Sullivan's fleet finally began its journey home, they carried with them proof that humanity's enemies could be defeated. The operation had cost 12 human ships and 400 crew members, but it had accomplished something unprecedented. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had been forced to abandon conquered territory. Captain Thompson stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, looking out at the ruins of Zarian 7. The mining station where 12 Zephyrians had died was now just floating debris, but it represented something larger. It was proof that every human death would be answered. Every destroyed colony would be avenged. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a message from Earth. President Carter wants to speak with all fleet commanders." The transmission showed the president standing in the White House briefing room, surrounded by the military leaders who had planned Operation Homecoming. Her expression was serious but satisfied. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter began, "what you have accomplished in the past week will echo throughout galactic history. You have shown the universe that humanity cannot be destroyed, cannot be broken, and will never accept defeat as final." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "But more importantly, you have delivered justice for our fallen colonists. Every family that died at New Denver, every child killed at Kepler Colony, every innocent civilian murdered by Zephyrian arrogance has been avenged. Their sacrifice was not in vain." Back in Zephyrian space, emergency sessions were being held in the halls of the High Council. Military advisors presented reports that no one wanted to believe. The outer territories, conquered at such great cost, were now too dangerous to occupy. The human fleet remained at large, striking without warning and vanishing without trace. "The recommendation is clear," announced General Mortax, the Empire's highest military authority. "Humanity must be left alone. Any further aggressive action against their worlds risks retaliation that we cannot defend against." The debate was brief. No council member wanted to explain to their constituents why more Zephyrian ships were being destroyed by a species they had once considered primitive and weak. The Outer Rim territories were quietly written off as too dangerous to control. On Earth, the returning heroes received a welcome unlike anything in human history. Parades filled the streets of every major city. Children wore costumes representing the ships that had humbled the mighty Zephyrian Empire. The colonists who had been evacuated 6 months earlier wept with joy at the news that their sacrifice had been avenged. Admiral Sullivan stood before a joint session of the Earth Congress, receiving humanity's highest military honors. But her thoughts were not on medals or ceremonies. She was thinking about the message that humanity had sent to the galaxy. "We did not seek this war," she told the assembled representatives. "We did not want to become warriors. But when forced to fight, we showed that humanity fights not just with weapons, but with memory, planning, and absolute determination to protect our own." In the months that followed, the story of Operation Homecoming spread throughout known space. Other species that had been conquered by the Zephyrian Empire began to whisper about the small aliens who had driven the mighty empire from their conquered territories. Pirates and raiders gave human ships a wide berth, unwilling to risk the terrible retribution that might follow. The Zephyrians had rejoiced in their victory over humanity. They had celebrated the burning of human colonies and the deaths of human families. But they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that driving humanity away meant the war was over. They learned, too late, that for humanity, the war only ends when justice is served and the dead are avenged. The galaxy would remember that lesson for generations to come.